guy who helped to be an architect of mass incarceration, this is an inadequate solution to what is a raging crisis in our country.
Corey knows that's not true. If you look at the mayor's record in Newark, one of the provisions I wrote in the crime bill, a pattern and practice of misbehavior, his police department was stopping and frisking people, mostly African-American men. If he wants to go back and talk about records, I'm happy to do that, but I'd rather talk about the future.
Joining me now is Marc Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League, which has been hosting several of the Democratic candidates this week at its annual conference in Indianapolis. Kamala Harris only this morning. Welcome. Thank you very much. Obviously,
Thanks,
this is happening for the Urban League at a critical time when race is front and center in the campaign, largely because of the president and his racist comments about the so-called squad, the four Democratic congresswomen, the freshmen women of color, but also because of this dispute that Cory Booker and Kamala Harris have opened up with Joe Biden about his own record.
And I think what's healthy, and we've had all three of them here and 9 candidates in total, Andrea, is that it reflects a debate and a competition for the African-American vote. These candidates are not ignoring the African-American vote for granted. And I think it's a fair conversation about the 93 crime bill, but it's also a fair conversation about now in 2019 what will be the strategy around continuing the need to end mass incarceration and criminal justice reform. So I find the discussion, honestly, to be frank and refreshing, because it's what we ought to be discussing, and for them to go back and forth, for them to have a discussion and have a debate is what our constituents here, what our members here really want to hear, because it demonstrates that they're clued in to the issues that the African-American community feels are most important.
Are you at all surprised that Joe Biden is dominating in a new poll out of South Carolina with a large African-American Democratic constituency, despite the attacks on his past record and the way he described his past relationships with segregationist senators, seemed to praise them in the past? That was a big issue, of course, with both Booker and Kamala Harris in the first debate.
I think what Joe Biden's probably got going for him is a long, long record, a long set of relationships, and probably some sensibility that not only is he electable, but also prepared to be president. I think Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Kristen Gillibrand, who was here, and Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, all of them who did a very credible job, and I would call it an excellent job, presenting themselves, are not as well known, haven't been around as long, or not as known by the community. And I think the community is evaluating who can be president on day one and who would be the most viable general election candidate. Now, I also say, Andrea, it's early. We're in July. The primaries don't start for many, many months. There's a lot of campaign, a lot of discussion to be had, a lot of debate to be had, and a lot of issues to be talked about. And so I don't think the state of the race today may remain the state of the race, or it could remain the state of the race. This is a competitive environment, and I think people in the community, Joe Biden has probably been to the National Urban League 10 times in the last 15 years. We know Kamala Harris. We've honored her. There's a great sentiment for her. Cory Booker grew up in the Urban League. This is a healthy competition for the support and the votes of our community. Now, why people may be shocked by it is because we haven't had, generally speaking, a vigorous competition for the African-American vote in the Democratic primaries. We've had a lot of candidates who sort of did drive-by politics. They may have ignored the community. They may have taken the community for granted. So this is, I think, a new normal in the changing demographics of America.
And the president's comments, I haven't heard from, I know you've spoken about it, but I haven't been able to ask you personally how you feel about the way the president has attacked these members of Congress.
When the president attacked these members of Congress, a chill went up my spine. And I was reminded of being a kindergarten and first grader, going to an integrated school, elementary school in New Orleans, and leaving school and being chased home by older white boys who said, "Go back to where you came from." Those words are racist. Those words mean something. Those words are un-American. And the chill went up my spine. It's unacceptable. It's not presidential to do it. And the wedge politics and the politics of demonization, where you seek to people in an effort to gain political advantage, is really not the type of politics, not the type of democracy that is in the best interest of this nation. So it affected me, in a personal way, because it reminded me of being treated poorly, badly, as a boy growing up in New Orleans, as the country, before the Civil Rights Act. I started school in 1963, and the schools had been integrated just a year before I went.
Marc Morial, thank you for your reflections on all
Thank
of
you.
that.